sexual orientation. 50 years later, in this year of Jubilee, we're standing once again in the shadow of that great emancipator, having been summoned to these hallowed grounds to reverberate the message of that great liberator. For there's a remnant from 1963, Congressman Lewis, Ambassador Young, that still remains, who has come to bequeath that message of freedom to a new generation of people who must now carry that message in their time, in their communities, amongst their tribes, and amongst their nations of the world. We must keep the sound and the message of freedom and justice going. It was my mother, as has been said previously, Coretta Scott King, who in fact 30 years ago assembled a coalition of conscience that started us on this whole path of remembering the anniversary of the March on Washington. She reminded us that struggle is a never-ending process. Freedom is never really won. You earn it and win it in every generation. And so we come once again to let freedom ring, because if freedom stops ringing, then the sound will disappear and the atmosphere will be charged with something else. 50 years later, we come once again to this special landing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial to reflect, to renew, and to rejuvenate for the continued struggle of freedom and justice. For today, 50 years later, my friends, we are still crippled by practices and policies steeped in racial pride, hatred, and hostility, some of which have us standing our ground rather than finding common ground. We are still chained by economic disparities, income and class inequalities, and conditions of poverty for many of God's children around this nation and the world. We're still bound by a cycle of civil unrest and inherent social biases in our nation and world that oftentimes degenerates into violence and destruction, especially against women and children. We're at this landing, and now we must break the cycle. The prophet King spoke the vision. He made it plain, and we must run with it in this generation. His prophetic vision and magnificent dream described the yearning of people all over the world to have the freedom to prosper in life, which is the right to pursue one's aspirations, purpose, dreams, well-being, without oppressive, depressive, repressive practices, behaviors, laws, and conditions that diminish one's dignity and that denies one life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The freedom to participate in government, which is the right to have a voice and a say in how you are represented, regulated, and governed without threats of tyranny, disenfranchisement, exclusionary tactics and behaviors, and to have freedom to peacefully coexist, which is the right to be respected in one's selfhood, individuality, and uniqueness without fear of attack, assault, or abuse. In 1967, my father asked a poignant and critical question: where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And we say with a resounding voice, no to chaos and yes to community. If we're going to rid ourselves of the chaos, then we must make a necessary shift. Nothing is more tragic than for us to fail to achieve new attitudes and new mental outlooks. We have a tremendous and unprecedented opportunity to reset the very means by which we live, work, and enjoy our lives. If we're going to continue the struggle of freedom and create true community, then we will have to be relentless in exposing, confronting, and ridding ourselves of the mindset of pride and greed and selfishness and hate and lust and fear and idleness and lack of purpose and lack of love, as my brother said, for our neighbor. We must seize this moment, the dawning of a new day, the emergence of a new generation who is postured to change the world through collaborative power facilitated by unconditional love. And as I close, I call upon a brother by the name of Nehemiah, who was also in the midst of rebuilding a community. And in the midst of rebuilding a community, he brought the leaders and the rulers and the rest of the people together. And he told them that the work is great and large, and we are widely separated one from another on the wall. But when you hear the sound of the trumpet, and might I say, when you hear the sound of the bell today, come to that spot and our God will fight with us. And so today we're going to let freedom ring all across this nation. We're going to let freedom ring everywhere we go. If freedom is going to ring in Libya, in Syria, in Egypt, in Florida, then we must reach across the table, feed each other, and let freedom ring.
In 1963, the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed. The bell was saved. And thanks to the church and William Bell, the mayor of Birmingham, that bell is here. To help celebrate Dr. King's legacy and this day, let freedom ring. Please welcome our next performance by Tony and Grammy Award winner, Heather Headley.
And we're awaiting the President of the United States to speak. You can see he and the First Lady are standing there next to the bell as Heather Headley, a gospel and R&B singer, is performing now. That bell is from that church, 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, September 15th, 1963. The three little girls who died were Addie McCollins, Cynthia Wellesley, Carol Robinson, and Denise McNair. And it happened just a month, not even a month, after the March on Washington. And of course, when that happened, many around Dr. King said, "We have heard from you. We have heard from the nation. The nation has showed up here. But what will be the people who are against us? What will be their response? What will be the Klan's response?" And that response was to bomb a Black Baptist church in Birmingham, Alabama. I want to bring in my guests here again, Van Jones, who is a commentator here on CNN, an analyst, and also the new host of Crossfire, and Sheila Jackson Lee, Democratic Congresswoman from Texas. We were in the middle of a story as we were talking here about the folks who are standing here, and about John Lewis and everyone speaking directly to people, directly to young people, and old, saying, if you think things haven't changed, walk in my shoes for just a little bit.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. When you talk about young people, you think about his young children. The one that did not speak, Dexter, was there as well.
Yes.
You saw the.
You don't see him much.
You don't see him very much. You saw the young firebrand of the little baby daughter. You saw the third, but Dexter has played an important role in that family. He is the one, when he saw his mother suffering with lack of funds, stepped up to make sure that the King papers were respected, the King's speeches were respected. And so he's a quiet power in the family. I was so good to see Dexter there.
So when you use that speech or any of his speeches, you must go through Dexter.
Yes, if you want to make money off of a King's speech, you have to go through Dexter. He needs to be respected.
He did that for his mother.
He did that for his mother.
Dr. King did not leave his family in wealth.
Yes, people act like Dr. King was a rich man. Dr. King gave away money. He didn't even accept the Nobel Prize money. He gave it away. And so when he was shot, his children suffered financially. So Dexter, who has not been celebrated today, he stood up for his mother. I was so proud to see him there. I was so proud to see the young granddaughter there. She was afraid to hear the bell ringing, just being a child. This is a real family, and they've suffered for America, and so they should be honored.
Van and Congresswoman, sit tight just for a second because we have some developing news that I want to get to my colleague here in Washington as well, and that's CNN's Wolf Blitzer. Wolf, I understand you have some breaking news, and it's involving Nidal Hasan, his sentencing.
Has been sentenced has received the death sentence unanimously recommended by a military jury. Fort Hood, Texas. Nidal Hasan murdered 13 fellow soldiers back in 2009. He wounded some 32 others. Now a jury has unanimously recommended that he be put to death, the death penalty for Major Nidal Hasan. He did not challenge that death sentence. In fact, he seemed to suggest he wanted it. He wanted to be a martyr for the so-called cause that he was promoting, an Islamist cause. Clearly, he was influenced by the Islamist movement. So the president, Nidal Hasan, gets the death sentence. If in fact he gets the death sentence, he will be the first in some 50 years. Here's the president at the Martin Luther King commemoration.
To the King family, who have sacrificed and inspired so much. To President Clinton, President Carter, Vice President Biden, Jill, fellow Americans. 5 decades ago today, Americans came to this honored place to lay claim to a promise made at our founding. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In 1963, almost 200 years after those words were set to paper, a full century after a great war was fought and emancipation proclaimed, that promise, those truths, remained unmet. And so they came by the thousands from every corner of our country. Men and women, young and old, blacks who longed for freedom and whites who could no longer accept freedom for themselves while witnessing the subjugation of others. Across the land, congregations sent them off with food and with prayer. In the middle of the night, entire blocks of Harlem came out to wish them well. With the few dollars they scrimped from their labor, some bought tickets and boarded buses, even if they couldn't always sit where they wanted to sit. Those with less money hitchhiked or walked. They were seamstresses and steel workers, students and teachers, maids and Pullman porters. They shared simple meals and bunked together on floors. And then, on a hot summer day, they assembled here in our nation's capital, under the shadow of the great emancipator, to offer testimony of injustice, to petition their government for redress, and to awaken America's long slumbering conscience.